An objective aspect of anything can never be recognized through thinking. I say aspect instead of truth because there is absolutely nothing that is absolutely true. What is truth? Theory that becomes a so-called fact because it can be verified and agreed upon. But is this really an objective truth? How could anything truly be objective when the observer who verifies and makes agreements, mankind, is a completely relative subjective creature? Even independent of the thinking process, that which filters, converts, and translates, the data gets filtered, converted, and translated through the senses before it even arrives to the point where it can be thought about. So how exactly is objectivity arrived at when the substance of thoughts are dealing with an interpretation of what actually is? Empirical understanding can only come through direct knowing, and direct knowing cannot be known if it is approached through an indirect process such as sense perception and thinking. So any truth seemingly arrived at is only applicable to this specific limited configuration. Not only that, but the converted data that is relative to this configuration is but a small grain in a vast unlimited ocean. Mankind's frame of reference probably only covers about 1% of everything that is, if even that. So how is objectivity established without a full picture? So at best, mankind's perspective, that which is a converted interpretation only covering a fraction of the full picture, is only relative to a minute contextualization. So if mankind could call anything an absolute objective truth, it is only an absolute objective truth confined to this tiny island of contextualization. This, of course, means there is nothing really absolute or objective about it. It is limited, relative, and subjective. But what about just truth relative to a contextualization? Well, mankind barely agrees upon anything, but even the things all mankind agrees upon is not truth. Because mankind does not know the fundamental essence of things, because he cannot access them directly, not to mention all that which cannot even be accessed at all with the limited senses of perception, and the fact that what is accessible is filtered and converted through the senses and the thought process, means that any simple truth limited to a contextualization is a fabricated disambiguation in a profoundly vast abstract unknown. Not to mention that these limited truths are subject to change and definitely will eventually change. A truth, by definition, is something that should hold true. If it changes or later becomes untrue, then at best it can only be called a temporary truth, which again means it is completely relative. So never mind absolute objective truth. There is no such thing as truth, period. What could be said is that there are agreements on temporary phenomena, but that's it. There are no implications of agreement other than there is an agreement. And even the substance of what man agrees upon is a facade. All material phenomena is not what it appears to be. To believe otherwise is to be a naive realist. And this is not even in question. Even science backs this up. Break it all down, and all materials are composed of atoms, and all atoms are composed of energy, a unified field of infinite energy, non separate. So the agreements are based on a multitude of labels assigned to the abstracts of the tools of sense perception. This is the disambiguation process, contriving distinctions and separations where there are no distinctions and separations. And whether things break down infinitely, meaning that perhaps energy can be broken down further, and whatever energy breaks down into can be broken down further, and so on and so on. Or whether if you break things down far enough you reach nothingness, doesn't matter. The implication is equally that things are not how they appear to be on the surface. This has been known for a very long time, even before the advent of science by the inward explorers. This is why it is so odd that people who claim to be searching for the truth of all things, ones that tend to deal in thoughts, beliefs, truths, absolutes, and objectivity, continue to search for it on the so-called outside, convinced that the producer of all these superficial phenomenal items is out there somewhere. This is a major fundamental flaw, one that is largely conducive to mankind's woes. It's kind of like thinking that the source of dreams can be found somewhere in a dream environment, or that the source of the shadows on the cave wall can be found somewhere in the shadows. You have a frame of reference, a point of perspective, and this is the only thing you really know to be for sure. That which is verified by your awareness of your direct experience of it. If you feel compelled to call something truth, then this is the closest you're gonna come. Without this, there are no such things as thoughts, beliefs, truth, absolutes, or objectivity. So it reasonably follows that if one is seeking to know the hidden designs and source of all things, that you start with what is known to be for sure. Searching elsewhere is looking past the sure thing and getting ahead of yourself. If you want to understand what you're looking at, then take a look at that which is doing the looking. If you want to question something, question that which is doing the questioning. You want to know something, then know that which is doing the knowing. So start with the thing you call yourself, then remain aware as you subtract this self. The awareness that remains after the self has been subtracted is the only avenue with access to anything resembling truth, absolutes, or objectivity. Eureka! You have just serendipitously found the source of all things. The thoughts and experiences of your reality filtered through the senses into your consciousness is only made possible by an awareness of them. The awareness that is made aware of the awareness by the total awareness that imagines all these things. You want objectivity, then become acquainted with total awareness. Beyond this, all else is subjective. Nothing more than a big pile of relative distinctions, the convoluted, complex web of thoughts, beliefs, labels, opinions, judgments, discriminations, and agreements that only serve to push us further and further away from understanding the nature of the fundamental essence of all things. So stop thinking about it and start experiencing it without thought. Thinking is completely overrated. It's kind of amusing that people pride themselves by being free thinkers, sneering and looking down upon those who don't think for themselves. But the free thinkers are just as lost in the maze as those who fill their thoughts with dogma, propaganda, and conventional ideas. In the grand scheme of things, they are equally deluded. So free thinkers need to get off the high horse because they are no better off, and much of their so-called free thoughts are equally instilled in them. It's just that they are based on more contemporary dogmas of science, logic, common sense, and rationality. They are more intelligent, sophisticated, and psychologically gratifying, to be sure, but that's about it. They are still based on systems of thought and adapted as one's own. With a little bit of improvisation, collaging, and mixing and matching, they are then called free thoughts. But they are not really free thoughts. The only thing that could really be classified as free thought are the thoughts that arrive based on experiences that are without thought. This is taking a step towards objectivity. One can never be objective with thought because thoughts, by their very design, are completely subjective and discriminatory. Thought defiles experience. But what makes thought the most vile and repugnant is that it dismisses and looks past awareness and takes everything for granted in a veiled desperation to normalize, familiarize, trivialize, and conventionalize. Thoughts have a nasty habit of squeezing all the wonder, magic, and mystery out of life, all for a sense of security, safety, comfort, and a righteous authoritative notion of knowing truth absolutely and objectively. There is a saying, the man who really knows something knows that he knows nothing at all. When speaking with one of these scientifically inclined freethinkers about consciousness, reality, the universe, and the nature of existence, you would think that you were talking about chopped liver. They will tell you things like, it's just biology, just chemistry, just crude primitive forces, or just materials. Really? Just that? Is that all it is? Compared to what? This stinks with an air of falsely assumed objectivity coupled with some idea of superiority, cleverness, and entitlement. Yeah, humans have only been around for a blink of an eye and endowed with intelligence, industry, and crude technology for even less than a blink of an eye. And despite only knowing a tiny, tiny fraction of all that is, somehow these free-thinking authorities on truth, absolutes, and objectivity have figured it all out. If only all the stupid people would just listen. After all, they have repeated themselves many times. Accept my dogma, stupid. And that's all it is. Dogma. The fact that it is based in science doesn't make a difference, especially when the majority of these free-thinking science buffs have zero experience with science. Regurgitating what is written in a science book is no different than regurgitating what is written in a holy book, and doing so is very unscientific. So this is not even anything even related to science. And by the same token, it's not even anything related to philosophy. A lot of these scientifically inclined science buffs fancy themselves philosophers, and it's a complete joke. It doesn't even come close to real philosophy or anything even remotely associated with philosophy. It's like a person watching someone else play a football video game and thinking that this makes them a football player. Completely ridiculous. There's no place in philosophy for dictators, authorities on truth, or for those who taint and smudge philosophy by trying to push conventionality, dogma, propaganda, and disambiguation in an attempt to dull down the mystery, which is the meat of philosophy, into something dull, mundane, commonplace, and inexplainable. Those that take everything with a grain of salt from some assumed default position of self-elected authority that has figured it all out and is now in a position to make absolute objective judgments. Excuse my French, but there's no elegant way of saying it. Full of shit. Even by completely conventional, materialistic, old-school science standards, how is the universe and this thing we call existence not astonishingly mystifying, magical, mysterious, and awe-inspiring? By what means are people so comfortable and familiar that they can dismiss it or make it into something droll? Saying that it's just this or just that doesn't cut it. Time, space, materials, chemistry, biology hasn't even begun to scratch the surface of the mystery. What is the origin? What came before these things? No matter what your answer, whether chemistry, crude forces, energy, matter, or anything else, the question will always be, what came before that? If you ever finally reach nothing, Same question. What came before that? And please, while you're at it, explain what nothingness is. How is it possible? Where is it located? Same for the universe. Where exactly is the universe located? Considering we don't know who or what we are, where we came from or where we are heading, and how, why, or when we are existing, to say anything in the universe is just something is ridiculous. Only one with a perspective outside of our universe might be qualified to say such a thing. But for a human to minimize it is audaciously arrogant and profoundly ignorant. Even just chemistry or just biology, taken at face value, is completely mystical, magical, and unfathomably miraculous. In fact, there is no greater fairy tale than the actual reality of our existence. No greater phantasmagorical storyline than the universe and everything in it. No greater work of fiction than the substance of our non-fiction.